With that, let's get started. First up, I want to welcome Isabela and Tony, who will be presenting Notebooks for All. They're both really immersed in Project Jupyter and have contributed a ton to the Jupyter accessibility team. Jupyter Notebooks are foundational tools for astronomy, data science, and many other STEM fields, but they currently are not accessible to screen readers and other assistive technology. So Tony and Isabela are going to give a background on that and share more about our project, which is trying to start to address that problem. So please give a warm welcome to Isabela and Tony. They came all the way from the West Coast. So thank you.
So we're going to be presenting from a document. You should have access to it so it has resources for you in the future. That's the first thing that I would add there. But with that, Jen actually explained a lot more about the project than I expected. Nonetheless, I'm super excited to talk to you today about the Notebooks for All project, which includes this event, but does not the limits of this event. We'll be talking more, though, about what we've been doing to better understand problems within notebooks accessibility issues, what kind of remediation we've been doing, what kind of larger fixes, and kind of where we're going in the future with that. But first, I know we were introduced. My name is Isabela Presedo-Floyd. I use she, her pronouns, and I look a little bit like I have a fluffy dog on top of my head at all times. Thank you. I appreciate that. In terms of what I've done on this project, I spent most of my time in the user research section, so that means figuring out, how are we going to set up these tests? What are we going to do? And I'm also here with Tony, right, who is he, they pronouns. Looks like a much larger dog than me, but I promise under the hat, equally poofy, equally will bark at you like a chihuahua a little bit. What he worked on this project is more code wrangling, handling a lot of our open source expertise, which is something we share, but he really is fantastic at it. So those are the perspectives we'll be talking from. Other people on the team, though, include Jen and Patrick, who you heard from, and Eric Tollerode, who is in the audience. I don't know if we'll hear from him today, but yes, so it's a really awesome team with a lot of different skills. And I will hand it over to Tony to explain a little more about space, maybe.
They gave me one.
Oh,
I got my own. Thank you so much. That was a great intro. Thank you so much, Isabela. I kind of wanted to think about this in the scale of space here. There's trillions of galaxies out there. At least that's what Google told me. Not very much an expert out there. There's billions of devices, which is more important on the software side for us. But more recently, there's millions of notebooks. This concept of a notebook, this concept of a document, new scientific document is growing on our social network for code. GitHub, there's over 10 million, and it's growing, and in a lot of organizations, they're growing at the scales of thousands. But there is a significant scale that we are trying to address in this very small project.
Right, and so within that, right, Tony talks about how many notebooks there are. A lot of these are shared across thousands of repositories, so many different disciplines, right? Like Tony was mentioning, neither one of us are astronomers here today. That's something we do not have, but luckily we do elsewhere on the team. And tons of languages, right? And this is both human spoken languages, coding languages. These are really documents that are cutting across all these different things. So when they're inaccessible, this is not a small impact. Well, we don't want anything to be inaccessible, I would say. This is impacting more people than we can really accurately count right now. And so our smallest picture, though, for the scope of this project is actually the notebook file itself. For those of you familiar with Jupyter, I am talking about the file, not the notebook that is the interface. I know they have the same name and you can't hear capitalization in my voice, so did want to specify that for anyone who's like, which notebook is she talking about? But yeah, in this case, we have a little circular, what is that called? Flowchart. That's what happens when you're staring at a bunch of people and forgetting words. That has 3 boxes in it, right? So it has design on the lower left. If you go up to center, up in center is development, and lower right is testing, and they all connect kind of in a circle. That's really the cycle we were working with in this project, right? Because we have these different expertise, and we're trying to cycle through, starting with what do we have with Jupyter right now? What do we want with Jupyter? How then taking it to the designers and saying, how are we going to test this? What do we want to do? getting that information then to development and kind of going back and forth there, and then retesting those changes that we had in a cycle. Of course, that sounds much more straightforward when I say it to you like that. Those cycles in practice are much messier. But that was really the thing we're focusing on, so that we're highlighting all those different skills from all the different people and creating a process that we could like validate that these changes were helping people, and centering, of course, right, feedback from actual disabled people instead of just guessing what was going to work well and not. Tony, though, is going to talk to me talk to everyone a little bit more about notebooks.
Well, the only way I can do this is if I yell, because I have to cram a lot into a very little.
Be careful.
But I'm gonna be careful with everybody's ears here. So notebooks, right? Most people are familiar with the physical concept of a notebook, where you just write some stuff or maybe draw some pretty pictures. That's exactly what scientists are doing. It's just that they have an interface for it. And it's not Word, it's something a little bit more than Word, right? So what we really have here, we have word processing documents that allow you to put computation in them. And it really just changes the way that we can see and explore the world. These notebooks are designed to combine code and narrative. With code becoming so much more popular, we need everybody to understand how to talk about the two. Writing code is a privilege, but software literacy should be accessible to everybody, and that's our major concern here. So these notebooks have a concept in them of cells, right? You take a bunch of cells, you put them together, and they can do magical things together. So these cells contain this code and narrative, and different people from different disciplines and different interests can put them together and tell their stories in really, really novel ways in a data-driven world. Now, this technology is affecting millions and millions of data scientists and students. There are popular providers with Jupyter, Google, Microsoft, so on and so forth. They're used in documentation, classrooms, books, testing. But this format is consistently inaccessible across all things. So as our user base grows, the number of people being excluded by this technology grow. And we're trying to figure out in this Notebooks for All problem, what makes an accessible computational document so that people can participate in the code world. And I think that that's your part about getting people to participate.
Oh, is it? Sure, yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, this is gonna, yeah. Participating, are we talking about participating with our user testing participants?
Well, you're doing inclusive design and you brought all these people in, so.
I suppose that's true, right? So I think what Tony is alluding to is actually that this project has been years in the making, believe it or not. I'm so excited to be here talking to you all about it. I'm so excited work has been done because all of us, right, we are across different organizations working together, met because there is a public Jupyter accessibility call. And so it took a few years, I think, but we figured out how to work together. And so that's been really awesome. That's part of why we have such a mixed group of people working on the project. That's also part of what made it possible is we all kind of had different resources we were able to work with to actually get like paid user testing, which has been something I think we were all aiming for, but really only able to do together. So that has been really awesome. Another aspect of that, though, is that we did want to make all this public, so I know we'll be going through that. Yep. So that also means, right, for those of you maybe less aware with open source, right, everything we're working on, code and actually our design assets too, in this case user testing assets, are totally open resources that anyone can use and really reuse as you see fit, and that's something I'm hoping we get to a little later. But yeah, so participation within our group, participation within, you know, wider disabled community of getting feedback, and participation, hopefully, from other people in the future, right? We want this resource to be useful to you all.
Yes, indeed. And every single thing you mentioned includes a round of advocacy, advocating for compensation, advocating for this work, and you continue to do it. It's fabulous. So one of the things that is hard is we live in this notebook world. We live with this concept of a notebook, and we wanted a better analogy to bring what we're trying to work on here. So I think the situation for us, the situation for data scientists using Jupyter, who've been the main clients that we've had, they want everything. They want to fill their house with everything. So now, if you try and move around the house, it's completely inaccessible. And that's the place that we got to. We have a lot of stuff, and we don't know how to make it accessible. So some of the steps these are some of the approaches and analogies that we wanted here were, how do we perceive a notebook as a house? If you use this for a classroom and people are together for an hour in the same space, this notebook transformed the space and allow people to collaborate. These cells are rooms. And when we started to do this and we started thinking about this house analogy, we realized that retrofitting accessibility is, it's a risk. It's an attrition problem. Either you have the resources to do it or you don't. We kind of found ourselves on that cusp here. So we're going to kind of talk about what it was like trying to retrofit things and understand what we have, and then what our new house might look like based on standards. So tell us about inviting people into our new house full of stuff.
Yes, I think the house right here with the notebooks, inviting people in is the user testing, right? We need actively, particularly because it's such a pain to use, to be perhaps a little more frank with it, right? Inviting people explicitly, like, we want you to come test this, we want you to come, right, complain, essentially. We want you to tell us what is working, what isn't, what do you wish it did? Like, that's kind of the process we're going through here. The image that is on this page is actually a list of GitHub issues from our GitHub repository, which stores all these resources. Part of the user testing was writing up these issues so that even if we don't get to fix them all, because really there is more than we have time for with this project, that they're all documented now, right? Both the problems that we had and in many cases solutions that we kind of like had discussed. So making sure that this work doesn't get lost, it's documented somewhere. And part of this also that we are not seeing here, we have these like concrete issues, but we also have larger takeaways, which I think are perhaps some of the most interesting ones to me, because many of them kind of apply to a lot more places than I thought. So in our rounds of tests, we had different focuses. There is a link here to what we called the navigation test results. These were tasks like, can you get here? Can you do this? Like, what does it take for you to be able to get to this place on the notebook? And I am currently writing up ones for some of our content tests. Jen and I had to pause that to actually work on this event, so that's a draft, sorry. But I do have some kind of surprise, takeaways for you to hear now. So in this case, we were testing like when you have a notebook basically stuffed with all this stuff. And these were existing Space Telescope notebooks we were able to use and test as well. So they are like real things that people did want to put in a notebook. That many of the fixes are like, I think what people involved in accessibility work would consider the basics, right? A lot of the issues we had were actually about like, there's no label. I have no idea what I'm doing here, right? There's no way for me to actually, there's no heading structure that makes sense. The good thing about those is those are actually very fixable ones. We know how to fix those things, and really anyone authoring a notebook can fix some of those on their own as well. We also had that users really rely on the familiarity in their experience to get around. Now, what that was varied a lot per participant, right? Some of them were like, oh, I know what a notebook is, and so I'm kind of looking for an idea of cells. Some people had no idea what a notebook was, but they were like, oh, but I know the code, so if I find the code, I can kind of backtrack. But that was kind of important, figuring out what their expectations are and what's gonna help them move. And that annoying but normal was the best case scenario we ever got, was that they were like, oh yeah, well I hate the way that works, but I hate the way that works everywhere on the internet. Yeah, that's not really your problem, but that was really interesting. I know Jen and I really leaned into, okay, well can we imagine what it would do instead, because maybe we can start figuring out these things that can help elsewhere. So that's kind of your preview there. I'm pretty sure I'm handing it back to Tony though.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, what could it be instead? It could be something standards-based. That's what we, so for any accessibility experts in the room or attending, every single notebook interface has a form. Multiple forms. Each cell has a form in it. So if I have 20 cells, I have 20 forms. Not a single one of them have a submit button on any of the products, anywhere. There's massive failures. And what it started looking like is it started being yeah, we got to this technology out of need, but the interfaces are familiar across so many products. What is the meaning of this thing? And we started thinking, well, hey, this is actually a form. let's represent this as a forum. We couldn't have got to these sort of things if we didn't have the feedback from people's experiences and really listen and interpret the results. So the way that Jen and Isabela shared their work in an open source way, even the rough progress and making the reports, I think is super exemplary, and how we're able to like come to these things and how user testing really benefited us. But the other thing that benefited us is, again, the community. And shout out again to Jen and Patrick for organizing the hackathon. It was really great to have these advocacy events, and we're learning that we have this house, but it's part of a community, right? So accessibility is community work, community advocacy, and we appreciate y'all being here. Yeah.
I think we have 2 minutes.
Huh?
We probably want to jump.
Do we have 2 minutes?
I think so.
Or we started late?
Yeah, we started late, so we can take an extra 5.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I want to talk about getting the house up to code. This is my favorite part. This is a short period of time to condense down hundreds of hours of work. But basically, what we started with was we started making fixes to the existing situation, and I lost my hammer and I started using my head for the nails instead. And I was like, there has to be a better way. So when we apply guidelines here, one of there are core principles in accessibility: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. But we have something more. We don't have a banking application. We have this malleable object. So we need to add more principles to it. It needs to be compromising. It needs to be assistive, and it needs to be flexible. So we can't provide the floor anymore. We got to clean up everything here. So these documents, these notebooks, they become documents when we see them, especially in the browser, and they contain metadata in them. So we started trying to apply water analogies. I need a table in my house. Yeah, I really need a table to have people over for dinner. So let's think about this thing as a table. One of the notebooks that we had from the Space Telescope folks had like 80 cells in it, right? So that's a lot of rooms in a house. It's a big McMansion there, right? So I need a lot of tables, and I need to be able to navigate this place, and it's not really hospitable as it is. So by going towards HTML5, which is a modern standard for the web, we can comply with more accessibility features of screen readers, if we obey the semantics right, if we use the right roles, if we stop having opinions as scientists and let designers have opinion as designers, I promise everybody's going to do more of what they're good at.
I hope we're not doing opinions either.
No, this project here is an example of it, and it's remarkable to see the interdisciplinary things happening at the Space Telescope Institute. I can't wait for the alt text talk. Anyway, now we have tab navigation, better tab navigation. I'm not going to show a demo because we're lacking on time, but how do you navigate these things? They're very unwieldy before. Now they navigate with tabbing and better on a screen reader. We're considering the legibility of it, so we're proposing things like a dyslexic font. And we're using code highlighting syntaxes provided by open source projects for colorblindness. There's more landmarks which we were missing. It works better when zoomed in, and there's a table of contents. So I was going to party, but there are a bunch of links here. You can go and check out some of the notebooks that we tested. There are links in this presentation here. This is an example of one of the notebooks. Just going to give a quick rip through it.
This is not how it is now, by the way.
This is not the situation it is now, but this is a better future than we were hoping for, which provides a better visual experience. But you can check out these on your own. Some of the things that we used while we were working on this, we used screen readers, dev tools, the accessibility object model, DQ, equal access checker, standards and heuristics. But this work is very limited.
It is. I think Tony's looking at me because I was going to explain that, right? So we did do a lot. I don't want to understate that, but I also think it's important to know what we didn't get to, right? And that a lot of the time are the next questions that we want to answer. Right, so one of the big things, we did work with a small sample, and it ended up being very visual focused, right, which that is not all disability. We did get a wide variety of visual focus, but I think that's important to note, that there's still actually a lot of research that we could be doing there. We also really focused on like navigation and reading experiences, right? We didn't talk about the editing experience at all right now. That's because that's another big problem. And we wanted to make sure we could kind of center in on things. In many cases, reading is also necessary to navigate adequately too, so it does feel a little bit like a precursor. Of course, people can also put almost anything in notebooks. I think Tony kind of explained that. The reason I bring that is we tested on existing notebooks, right? We tested on things that people are really using. But every day, I see people show up with new things in notebooks I've never seen before. And that's awesome on one sense, but also do keep in mind, right, if you're one of those people writing notebooks, give it a try, maybe, with something. See what you can do to check its accessibility, which is a longer discussion. And as Tony mentioned, the retrofitting is difficult. There were a lot of cases where we were hitting our head against walls. And so figuring out what to do with this existing product rather than starting from scratch has been an experience. But yes, I think we did. It's felt like a lot of things from the outside. Obviously, we're going over time, so I guess that's evidenced in our, yeah. You have another 10 minutes. 10?
Wait, what? You said we had 20 minutes.
I feel like, yeah.
Okay, anyway, let's. Okay. Okay, cool.
So,
all right, so we'll leave some room for questions for the part where maybe we sped through. But let's talk about what we really did. Like, we included disabled
I was going to
people.
say, that's probably my fault not doing math right.
No,
So
it's
I'll
okay.
take credit
Don't worry
for
about
that. That's okay. I haven't had to take a math class in very many years, I think, contrary to many
That's
of
what
you.
notebooks are for.
No. No, the math still needs to be done right. But yeah, right. So I think a lot of this are things that we already discussed, but to kind of reiterate it, right? Including disabled people, I cannot tell you how many accessibility projects I have been on where that has been a struggle to make that happen, or in some cases impossible. And it's sometimes tricky with Jupyter because we know it's going to be so inhospitable, right? Like we know we're inviting people to a house that is not up to code in many cases, and we're just kind of holding it together. But we also found a lot of patterns, right, that like across all these notebooks that became like, things become a lot clearer, right? When you're testing and we're trying all these different notebooks and going through these cycles, a lot of things that I kind of didn't see before have become a lot more clear to me, kind of what I was talking about earlier with some of those like, you know, annoying but normal and all those kind of things, like just kept coming up, even though, right, even with our limited sample and even with our limited budget. We also, right, fighting that technical debt, that's really Tony's wrangling job, that more than mine in this case. But that has been, every time we think we get a little closer, right? I think that resonates with people. We feel like it's 2 steps back some days. And of course, like being able to share these findings, being able to share it with all of you, having resources at all for like open user testing things are not things that I've encountered in my years in open source. And I'm really like, super, if anyone is interested in that, I'd love to walk you through those resources and see like what you may be able to repurpose for yourself, right? Like what kind of user testing structures do we have for you? And yeah, I guess I got ahead of myself there. All those open resources, because Tony also has been producing things that I know a little less how to explain well. But it's been, I'm just really excited to see this process not only happen, but for us to really be able to document it so that people can carry it on, right? Because the work is not done. I do not want to send that message by at all. Do you want to wrap up with that one?
No, I think I just want to highlight how remarkable it is what a small interdisciplinary and inclusive team accomplished in such a short period of time on very limited resources. It's just challenging. These spaces need some more resources, so we appreciate y'all's advocacy and support in all of this stuff. And yeah, shout out to the team. Like I didn't think we'd get here, and it seemed ambitious, but we're at a good place, and it wouldn't have happened if a lot of special people didn't get together.
Right. Yeah. So there you go. I think that's it. I don't think we're doing questions.
Isabela and I have been working together for what? 4 years, 5 years?
10 minutes is not a bad guess,
No,
actually.
4 years or 5 years?
We've definitely known each other for 4. We've been working together a lot for like 3, though.
Yeah.
So we're both pretty used to cartwheeling at each other's chaos.
And we've never been able to give this presentation together.
Yeah.
This is our first time. So, thank you. Hey.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. But yeah, I how do we want to take questions in this case? Are there any? Raise your hand. Oh,
You gotta stop
there
talking
are
first.
questions. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Okay. I'm not used, I should also say I do a lot of remote work. I'm not used to giving these talks in person. I'm used to staring quietly at a chat for a moment. So that was surprising.
Hey, great job.
So this is a question for Isabela. I was, I'm sure that you can talk about this at length, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about kind of the modes of user testing that you used and what you found most valuable, if there were anything that sort of brought out particular surprises when you did this.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. The main thing that we did, we really only used two methods in that kind of loop because we wanted to test different things in the notebook more than like test different things. So really it was usability testing, which means that we created like a script. I'm using that word loosely. We do call it a script in this case, but it's not like we have to read everything word for word, but kind of it's like a list of tasks we're going to ask people to do, right? Like in many cases, we're specific about the way we're asking it too, because we want to test like, okay, if we ask them to find this cell by number, what if we ask them to find this by like heading, and kind of like thinking in those ways. So that is that's the main design, but we also kind of had these user interviews at the end of that as well, which are more open questions. So those are not completing tasks. Those are more, in many cases, we do it kind of as a reflection at the end where we get things like, okay, like what happened? What did you expect? But those were really the main two methods that's mentioned in the write-ups about them, though if those terms are not familiar to you, you might have to give it a quick look up. Yeah, I think those are, I'm trying to think if there's anything I want to say about that, but was that a helpful? Yes. Okay.
We have some, Isabella's got her scripts and stuff on our documentation.
Yeah.
So you can find links wandering through these things. So there's the script and then the results. And some work in between's reproducible if you check out the GitHub issues.
Well, and to describe that on screen real quick, Tony is showing an image of the documentation for the repo we have, which is indeed linked in the Markdown document that we shared. But yeah, this is a write-up that kind of describes like what we tested. It also has some more details about what the participants were using. Like you can see what browsers we tested and what versions of things, if that's helpful to you as well. Yeah, thank you for asking.
So I think you may have just answered my question already by showing this. I was interested in where you put the WCAG overlap guidelines. Were they under accessibility tips in the nav that you just went by real quickly?
We haven't completed those yet.
Do you mean in the sense that you want to see like a mapping one-to-one?
No, I just want to see where the guidelines are. I want to see the guidelines.
Yeah, so we have there's a checklist in the documentation, and again, all of this stuff, content is in the GitHub repo. So accessibility tips, we have a document describing different things. Again, everything's work in progress. These will inform you about some of the different states of the notebook and ways that we talk about the notebook in accessibility tips and how you can publish. And then there is an authoring checklist. Oh, the formatting stinks. I'm sorry. That's embarrassing.
No,
Oh.
That's like a normal checklist problem I've had. To kind of give some context, what he means work in progress also is these came from the user test, but the documents themselves have not been tested. Like I would not be surprised if people trying to use these had further feedback. But yes, they all exist here, and I'm happy, like if you come talk to me, I can show you specifically where in the documentation as well. But yeah, that's the main place that they live right now, is on GitHub.
I should say this out loud, I'm realizing. If you have a question, raise your hand and I will bring a mic to you.
So I don't use the notebook, so this is a new thing for me and it's fascinating. But my question was, if I were to do this and get involved, having just like a lot of really good examples would be wonderful. So is part of your effort kind of getting people together to create new notebooks from scratch that are following these best practices, like having that very deliberate people who are invested and interested in all that, because to have that kind of like sort of critical mass of examples for people to work from?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. That's definitely something that I want to do. I realistically do not think we are going to have the time in this project to create new notebooks with it. The main thing we've been looking at doing is perhaps like updating an existing Space Telescope notebook following those kind of guidelines that we had. But that is kind of like, that is definitely a dream that I want. I just know that we have some more things we need to wrap up in terms of what we've promised, since that was not something initially we thought we were going to find, right? We were actually not looking specifically for authoring recommendations. It was just that in doing all this navigation and content testing, we got a lot of feedback where it was like, oh, these are actually things the authors can do. Like, we expected only to find things that would require development fixing.
Right.
And we really ended up finding that, like, that is a big thing. But there's actually a lot of things that authors are doing that would make a big difference as well, right? Like, headings is an author choice. Like, the developers actually can't help you use good headings at this point, right? Like, we could put on different guardrails, but so at the moment, no, I do not have like a, this is the beautiful paragon of a notebook type of thing. But that's what the checklist kind of is starting to be like, where you can review. It is pretty long, I will say that. I think we can out. But yeah, that is something I hope to have in the future. If anyone's interested in that, actually talk to us, because I would really be interested in making that happen.
Yeah, that's my stretch goal for the project, but I'm not very limber.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Margaret Carruthers. I'm a science writer here.
Yeah, for future questions, sorry. Wish you should say your name because people online don't know who you are. Are there other questions? Right here.
Hey everyone, I'm Beth Fogelhatch, and I'm proud to say that I'm one of the user testers. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but it was one of the best experiences I've had. Although I don't know if Jen agrees with that, because I was one of those people. Why are we doing this? What is this for? Why are there no headings? But it was a very good experience for me, because I'm an analyst for the federal government, and we use Jupyter Notebooks all the time, or I should say my colleagues use it because I can't use it. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to help, and I don't really have a question. I'm saying this because I want people, as many people as possible, to participate, because you are helping not only the Space Science Telescope Institute, but you are helping all blind people everywhere like me who are analysts or who want to become analysts. And, you know, it's one thing to understand the data and how it works, but if you can't even read what your colleagues are reading, and you can't edit notebooks, you can't write them, it sets your career back, and it's really frustrating. So I am happy to participate in the user testing, and I think it was a great experience, and everyone did a great job. So I just wanted to put a plug in for everyone to do that who was able to.
Hey, thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much.
I have one question for you. Can you slowly navigate to that accessibility tips for creating and publishing Jupyter Notebooks?
Yes, but I'm going to
People
do
online, because they will be interested in those links.
Okay, so I'm going to do this on GitHub instead because it's more predictable. If you go to our link for our Notebooks for All repository, it should be in scattered in places for the event. Which one's it in?
It's in user tests, I think. No, it's resources, you're right.
Resources,
Resources and event hackathon, notebook authoring checklist.
and then Notebook authoring checklist. If you're at the top of the repository, you can also search for it up in the, there's no search unless you're signed in, but you can search for checklist if you're signed in. So yes, resources, hackathon, event, and you'll find the accessibility tips and the checklist.
Thank you.
Thank you.